Signs of the Southland, Sunday, December 5th, 2021. Mr. Grant, the college football season is effectively over, but you still have things to complain about, so you say.
Yeah, I actually noticed something last night, and it kind of gives a little bit of credence to the tinfoil hat ESPN controls everything kind of thought process that we hear about sometimes. Something that I am sometimes willing to agree with, but I thought it was very interesting that when I logged in to check the scores of the ongoing games during the middle slate games, so the 4 p.m. hour, the clear and away, in my opinion, most interesting, compelling, concerning, if you're a Georgia Tech fan like us, game was nowhere to be found on the home landing page of the ESPN app, and it required a click through. When I went to check later to go check the Michigan-Iowa score, a game that also was compelling, me as a Midwesterner and people at large, with playoff implications and whatnot. Also, not on the main page of ESPN. What is the through line between these two games, you might ask? Do you want to hazard a guess?
No, shoot.
Yeah, well, the first game was on CBS, and the second game was on Fox, and I don't think that is any coincidence that ESPN is sticking the ACC championship at the top of that list, or the American championship, depending on which window you're looking at. But obviously there's probably some conspiracy angle to that, but I just thought it was at least a little bit amusing that it wasn't. There was 6-7 games on the list, and it didn't even pull up Bama versus the Athenians or Michigan, Iowa. So just putting that out in the water for your conspiracy minded those among us.
I don't know.
That was really not fun.
All I'm hearing is that ESPN actually really likes G5 teams.
I mean, anything's possible, right?
Anything is possible now that Cincinnati has officially become the first college football, or I guess first G5 team to make the college football playoff. But football is far, far down our list, our run sheet today. So let's start on the basketball court, this time in Athens. Well, technically this team was in Athens. Women's basketball played a game up there versus the number 20th ranked women's basketball team in the nation. They won by 1 point, which is 1 point that they could have used versus Purdue earlier in the week in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. I mean, all these close wins, close losses, guess it all evens out in the end.
I mean, I have some opinions on the Purdue game, but that's less fun. I do want to say at least one thing on there. We could have iced that game. It's tough not to have it. And I think it is reasonable and fair to think we could have won that game, because we frankly could have or should have. Georgia Tech had the opportunity to sink some free throws at the end of the game. I believe they went 0 for 4 on free throws in the immediate down the stretch type time. That's tough. That's the game right there. And Purdue banked up a bit of a prayer shot with 7 seconds on the clock, 4 seconds on the clock.
Something stupid like that.
I think it might have been 3.9 actually. Now that
Very
I'm
specific. I'm also
my brain.
I also am now looking at it just so I can tell you exactly when it was. And we're waiting. Yeah, it was 3.9. Dear Lord, this score bug is awful for Fox.
That's the Big Ten network, I think.
No. It's also Fox. It's also Fox's. God, that is awful. How do people watch this sport on that network?
It takes up like half the screen.
It's worse than the ESPN ticker. I want to double back to the thing that you're saying about free throws, though. This has been a consistent problem for this team this season, where they cannot make free throws. Not even in clutch situations. They just sometimes just cannot. versus Purdue, they were at 55%. I'm pulling up the
I've got
Georgia
UGA
one.
up.
Go for it.
They did not go to the line all that many times. I believe they were 9 for 9 plus 2 plus 2.
18,
9 for
50%.
18. That's worse. They were worse. That's not
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So they were 11 for 20 on, what was this, Wednesday? And then went 9 for 18 on Sunday. So not great performances from the line, especially when you're getting to the line that often.
Yep.
I mean, they got to the line significantly more than Athens did in this game today. And it was about even in Purdue. So you got to make those shots, especially when you're crashing the boards that well versus Purdue. You have to make those shots.
And we want to put a real number on that. They out rebounded Purdue 45-27. They had 14 offensive rebounds and 31 on defense compared to just 4 and 23 for Purdue. That was it's pretty telling, I think. It's also worth noting that they were without Loda Mylotnin in the Purdue game. Kubai, Stratmana, Hermosa, Bates, and Love got the start with Bilani, Aranaz, Carter, and Cameron Harrison spelling the breaks. It was a pretty even game. I think Purdue was in particular doing a pretty effective rotation. I guess it was clearly their starters that were bringing a lot of the punch, but they were able to spread it out. Whereas Tech was pretty reliant on Stratmana and Aaliyah Love. Lorella I only finished with, I believe, 7 points. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's pretty tough. That's one of your, and Hermosa with 8. That you usually with how Tech plays the post want to see them get a little bit more. But Tech shot pretty well in the first and was pretty cold in the second. That's the game. They were 17% from 3 again, and that's with Bates. They have to wake up from somewhere. But I think the thing that's more important here to take away from Purdue, and we can talk about Athens in a sec, is they were a point away from winning, and that was clearly, and we talked about it with Auburn as well. Georgia Tech, I don't think we've seen them play a complete game yet, and maybe they figure it out for in time for a big one this week. But yeah, top to bottom, they've struggled from 3. They've struggled from the line. A lot of players in foul trouble in a lot of games. It's a tough place to be playing in.
Mm-hmm. I want to double back to the thing that you said about Purdue's rotation. I think that's a really key point here, because let me just read off the minutes played by both teams here. So you have for Purdue, or for Georgia Tech, 40, 40, 27, 26, 40. So that's the starters. And then the bench, 1, 7, 9, 10. So that's a combined 27 points or 27 minutes from your bench during a 40-minute game. And then looking over at Purdue, 19, 31, 37, 35, 23 for the starters. And then for the bench, 21, 10, 5, 19. So you can see a pretty wide discrepancy where Tech puts up 27 minutes, and then Purdue almost has one person putting up 27 minutes on their own. So
yeah, I do want to say I tend to avoid calling out specific players or performances if it's not positive, but Sarah Bates played 40 minutes, went 1 for 9 from 3, 2 for 4 from the line for 5 points. I think that's pretty emblematic of Tech's struggles, right? We talked about the 3, we talked about free throws, and we talked about being pretty reliant on key players. It's tough. And I think we can pivot a little bit when we start to talk about the Athens performance as well. But it's pretty telling that Georgia Tech does not have kind of the 3 ball that we saw at the beginning of last year, and made it. We were kind of hoping to see them able to spread the floor a little bit more, but especially with no Loyal McQueen, who is also one of our shooters as well. It's definitely been, I think, rather telling. Your mileage may vary. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think I'm really with you here. I will say that the 3-point shooting performance was better today. Tech shot 4 of 13. I mean, 4 of 13 looks better on the stat sheet than 3 of 17. So take the percentages with a grain of salt here, but
no player missed more than 2 threes as well. But granted, some made none, but it's better to be 2 of 4 and 1 of 2 rather than 1 of 9.
Mm-hmm. I also want to say, looking at some of the game flow here, Purdue was ahead for a good chunk of the third quarter and a bit into the fourth, and then Purdue just went ice cold once they hit 43 points, and Tech pulled ahead and then away a little bit, and then Purdue pulled back into it. So this was a tight one heading into the last 6, 7, 8 minutes. The game versus Athens here. Oh, wow. My browser's being weird. Game versus Athens here, much in the same way, actually. Tech slowed down to open the third quarter. Athens takes a massive lead. I think it got up to 11, and it was just around 5 through the break. And then Tech pulled ahead about halfway through the fourth quarter. And then it got dicey very late. They just, Hermosa couldn't nail a couple free throws. Athens hit a 3 right near the end with a couple seconds left, and it got really tight. So for me, it comes back to hitting free throws and taking advantage of those opportunities, because you're looking at 9 points missed from the line in Athens today. You're looking at another, where's my sheet? Another 9 points on Wednesday. Those are difference makers. I think it's obvious or maybe cliche to say, but those are free points. You should get them. You should be better at getting them. And seeing that it's been a consistent problem is concerning to me.
Yeah. And I don't know. I keep saying, or keep thinking at least, that we'll get to the point where they work it out.
It's only been 7 games, or it's only been 8 games. So it could totally be worked out, but it's still like something to keep an eye on, right? It's something to note and something to keep an eye on for later. Especially
noting, like in today's game, Tech was at the line 18 times and made 9 shots. Georgia only went to the line 6 times. If they're seeing a pretty similar volume, I don't think we're talking about this game as a win, and that's tough. But one other thing that I did want to note, Tech on the glass, again, strong 44 rebounds, not quite as much of a strong margin as their hosts were able to get 37. So again, not like they were dominating, but it's good to see. And I think it's important to recognize phases of the game that are going well. Tech in general shot 36.8%. That's good. It's important to at least acknowledge that they led the majority of the game. I don't know. They led it by as many as 8, trailed by as many as 11. That's getting back in the game. It shows the offense can work. And now I'm just kind of rambling, looking for good things. But I do think it is important to acknowledge that, yes, a win is a win is a win. It's going into the win column on the score sheet. Doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to get done at the end of the day. And I think, unless you have something else, that kind of sets us up pretty well for talking about Thursday, because that is absolutely something that needs to be discussed on this podcast.
Talking about Thursday?
Oh yeah.
I'm unclear of where you're going with this.
This coming Thursday, most hotly anticipated women's basketball game on this campus, maybe ever.
Yeah. So here's the deal. We've just been talking about Tech not looking so hot from the free throw line, committing maybe a little bit too many turnovers. Guess who's showing up on Thursday?
The one most famous women's basketball team on the planet, perhaps?
The Stanford Cardinal, defending national champions.
Oh, Give me a break, sir.
Got him. It's number 2, UConn. It is the UConn Huskies, the sad Husky mascot. It's the UConn Huskies, 7 p.m. ESPN2, Thursday, December 9th. Do you have any initial notes?
In terms of like the game, we're going to need to play essentially our best game of Nell Fortner's tenure. If we want to win, we've played good teams close in the past.
South Carolina was close for a good chunk of it, and then South Carolina just out talented and pulled away late.
We did beat NC State in their own gym 2 years ago. We played them close last year. Those are good teams. But UConn is very good.
UConn is another level.
Yeah, up and down. They've been quite excellent. I think it's worth noting that they are without one of their stars. They have many.
Beckers is out with I think it was a leg injury. She had to be carried off the court in today's game. There's not been a prognosis that I've seen, at least so far. That happened pretty recently. So, but that is something to keep an eye on, at least her availability for this game. This is game 1 of a home and home. I believe the second half is next year at UConn. So, interesting scheduling decision. But I appreciate it. It's good entertainment value.
You gotta get this kind of experience. Obviously you get it in ACC play, but in terms of, I see it similar to why it is important to be scheduling men's basketball if they get opportunities in the future to take some of these MFEs and things like that. You want even if you're likely to be tested or even take a loss, the amount of buzz that playing UConn gets you, that granted, South Carolina nearly as good. Actually, this year probably better. But you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the program. It's playing Alabama in football, or Penn State in volleyball, or inking a series, if we ever did, with Arkansas or something or UCLA a couple years ago in baseball. Like, this is why you play those games, right? So it's important to actually do it.
It also looks good on the RPI and the strength of schedule.
Yep.
So it'll even if the game doesn't look great, and it's tough to say that out loud, but it's also UConn. This women's basketball is very heavily stratified. The top 5 are very, very good, and there's a massive gulf between the top 5 and the rest of the top 15, and then there's a massive gulf after that, and it's very, very difficult to break into each of those tiers.
We could be in for a world of hurt looking at some of these scores. It is worth noting, Connecticut 15 over Arkansas, by 30 over Minnesota, by 7 over South Florida. The Bulls are a pretty good team. They're top 15 team. They did get smacked by South Carolina, who, as we noted, probably the best women's basketball team any side of the Mississippi by a long margin this year. We have Connecticut smacking around Seton Hall, and then beating Notre Dame today by 20 points. So it's going to be tough. And UConn is a team that tests themselves, right? Georgia Tech could very well be ranked this week after beating number 20. But UConn will play UCLA. They'll play Louisville in the non-con. Us, obviously, South Carolina. Like, they're not afraid to schedule tough. And I think this shows that Nell Fortner knows that, you schedule your Hofstras and things like that to get some wins and get some experience. You play the rivalry game, obviously that's important, but playing UConn is going to give you about as good of a test as you can ask for heading into ACC play in a couple of weeks.
Good point you bring up with regards to Hofstra and wins. The get right game that's scheduled for immediately after UConn is the Sunday after the 12-12 versus Furman. That's a 1 p.m. tip on ACC Network Extra at home. Yep. So you go from the very hotly competitive UConn game to an opponent that is decidedly not the University of Connecticut women's basketball team.
I mean, if we go 1-1 this week, that is fine. If we go 2-0, that's ecstatic. If we go 1-1 and the wins UConn and the losses Furman, I think we're having a 20-minute breakdown of what the heck's going on this time next week. But
we might have to just give Gino a call and see if he can come on and explain what happened.
No kidding. I think it's also worth noting Tech will open with Wake Forest in ACC play the week after finals. They will be at rest the whole week after Furman. So this is the meat and potatoes. Then we have a couple assorted games before. Yeah, only 2 games in a 2-week span. So actually 2 games in an 18-day span. So even more than that. So like we said, I got to get through this. Then get well, get right, shoot a lot of
good on tests.
Yeah, tests. Unlike other schools, our athletes have to take real classes.
But come on, we're almost there. You can start that bit after we cross the threshold here. Finish.
That was too thickly veiled. I'm still upset about the UNC basketball game.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
We'll make it there. But yeah, women's basketball. If you do not have a ticket yet for Thursday night, go get one. This will be a great contest. So shilling.
Let's find out how expensive tickets are really quick. While you vamp about UConn or women's basketball.
I'm not going to vamp about UConn. I am going to note we do have after Wake Forest one more non-con game. That'll be against Boston, not Boston College, Boston University. That'll be a midday game on a Tuesday, and then it will be ACC play again starting on the 30th. Notes on that, as we noted, UConn did play Notre Dame today. They're a top 25 team again, so they should be on the rebound from last year being a down year. I believe we played them twice, both times on the road last year, which is weird. We get them once at home this year. We have Florida State twice, as we have several times in the last couple of years. NC State is on the road, and then I want to say Louisville is at home. So in terms of highlights, look for those, and then Clemson home and home. Of course, everything else kind of fills in from that.
Okay, so I have the ticket prices from SeatGeek, not a sponsor right now. $33 in general admission. That's including fees. Some bleachers are $51 each. I mean, I think they're like 20 base, like 20 face value before fees. So it's not that. It's actually still a pretty cheap ticket, like all considered, to watch UConn in the comfort of your own stadium.
I've got a question.
Oh God.
That I completely I have it worded well, but in terms of considering this game, is this a sellout then?
There are only 4 listings on SeatGeek. I mean, I don't really know where else I would check. I mean, I can check Ticketmaster, I guess.
I would say ramblinrec.com, but I assume if there's only 4 listings, then it's probably
well, that's on SeatGeek. SeatGeek is kind of weird about that. So let's check. Georgia Tech women's basketball. Georgia Tech women's basketball.
They're still selling them on the site. So you can go through Georgia Tech and hopefully find some for, $10, $15.
They're not going to be that expensive, and it's going to be a good game.
Yep.
And in any capacity, it'll be a good game.
Yep, I agree.
Let's move on. So you wanna tell the crowd about what you're upset about this week from the men's basketball program?
I have a strong you can't control what the officials are doing policy. That I think.
Look. He had a dinner reservation to get to. He was just trying to make sure that he got to the restaurant on time to be respectful.
No. We can talk about TV Teddy and the gang today all we want, but at the end of the day, we also did get outplayed in the second half, and
sure
I think
did.
I think that matters far more than anything we can say about the refs. Was it weird and questionable? Like that whole 4 reviews of one play thing? Yes. Were there things that I thought should have been called more, including traveling and double dribbling and, dragging your feet across the floor? Yes, I do. But in terms of the UNC game, I don't think you can point at that and say that is the reason. And there was a lot more we needed to do to right our own ship before that. So before we dive into UNC and the exact details there, I think it's worth going over the Wisconsin game. That was on Wednesday night at McCamish. McCamish. I'm working on it. I promise.
Yeah, we'll get it right one of these days.
Yeah. That was a late night game, unveiled the banner for the ACC championship, but it was a 70-66 final in favor of the visitors. The meeting of the 2 schools that do the Budweiser song as a tradition. So that was interesting, but I don't think you can say it was necessarily like a ref ball kind of thing, but Jordan Usher picking up several very quick and very ticky-tack fouls early in the game absolutely affected the lineups that we saw, affected the aggression we saw out of the team, and particularly him in the second half. I think not that the team played scared or played light, because that's not fair and probably not an accurate way to describe it. But when you have your Robin to Michael DeVoe's Batman on the bench for a lot of the game, really makes it tough to win ball games. I think Wisconsin is a good team, fully worth the top 25 consideration and all that. But especially with such a great performance out of DeVoe, a monster block. I think that was by Debo Coleman. But DeVoe played one of the best single person performances I think we've seen in a long time at Tech, but it's just not enough if shots aren't falling for anyone else. And granted, we did have other players contributing. Khalid Moore has really had a nice couple of game runs for himself, but the offense was stagnant in the post. That hurt. Miles Kelly just seems just a hair off on a lot of things. And those shots are going to fall. And that's why I still believe that this team's going to get better. But kind of a bit of a left turn from your original question. But in terms of Wisconsin, close game. Tech did fight back from a 10-point hole relatively late in the second half. And I don't know, it shows the team's got heart, but there needs to be some sort of offensive shakeup or helping or consistency more outside of one Mr. Michael DeVoe.
Yeah. And that became very apparent in about an 8-minute stretch of this UNC game, coming right out of the half, where Tech struggled to move the ball around the court, and struggled to move the ball into the paint. And UNC was really able to take advantage and force a lot of bad shots. And not just were they bad, sometimes if you take bad shots, they'll fall in, you'll get lucky. And that's kind of what happened for good stretches of that first half. I mean, Tech was shooting about 80% from 3 in that first half. And then that just fell off of a cliff. It was not going to be sustainable, and it wasn't sustainable when the second half opened. So there needs to be some sort of secondary consistent scoring threat on this team, and whether it's inside in the post playing your usual traditional bully basketball in the paint, or it's someone else that can really make threes at a consistent clip. And I think Khalid Moore was doing that at a pretty good clip earlier today, along with a bunch of others. But then there was nothing for like an 8-minute stretch. You have to not have a long stretch like that where you're getting forced outside and cannot make a rhythm starting or rhythm creating basket.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you can rely on Khalid Moore to be your second scorer, and I don't think you should. But that being said, like I said with Miles Kelly, he's going to get there. I believe that he's too talented for those shots not to fall. We haven't seen a breakout game for him yet. Debo Coleman arguably could be seeing more playing time. I'm not the coach. I'm not going to make those decisions or anything like that, but he's looked good with the amount of touches that he's gotten. And I don't know. I think those improvements are going to be there, but it also comes hand in hand with so much of our offense is get the ball to Rodney Howard and then kind of dies at the post. And earlier in the year, we were seeing him take more shots, but up against a bigger, more physical Wisconsin and a bigger, more physical UNC team, it just hasn't been there to work the pain and work it through him as much as, a Moses Wright, peak Ben Lammers, James Banks with all the great work that those three have done over the past 10 years. I think it's interesting. I think the obviously the stakes of games are all important, and you want to win the Wisconsin game as much as you want against UNC, but this is the first loss I think today that's really felt like a loss, for lack of better terms. Obviously, you don't want to lose to Miami.
Like a deflating one.
Yes, exactly. Like in Miami, and frankly, Jordan Usher's shot not falling at the end against Wisconsin to take the lead. Like that is something that you go and you say, well, like basketball's a game of a lot of random occurrences, and if a couple bounce our ways and we win. I don't think you can say the same thing about this game. We got outplayed. There were defensive things that we needed to tighten up, but defensive things that worked, right? So Pastner talks about getting old and staying old, but even with the experience of DeVoe, with the experience of Usher, with Parham hopefully back after Christmas, as Coach Pastner noted in his media availability this week, like those are old players, but Rodney Howard has not been a consistent getter of minutes at all until this year. Kyle Sturdivant's having to fill some new shoes. You're seeing Colin Moore with more playing time. You're seeing Debo and Miles need to work it in there too. And I don't know. I think we're at the point where we can say at least for me, I don't want to speak for you, but like I trust the staff to make changes and for players to get better. And, with more time or more availability for that to happen, I think it very much could. But yeah, that's kind of the rambly, like I want to be positive, but today definitely was tough.
Yeah, today was not fun for the same reason that whenever one of the big name tobacco road teams plays in Atlanta is not fun. And I think everyone knows what I mean by that. And so I'm going to stop that right there.
I want to note one thing, and this is not to condemn or be rude about anything in our particular fan base, but I will note, and maybe this is just me not being used to having crowds back in the stands again, but it seemed like Wisconsin turned out incredibly well and North Carolina turned out incredibly well. And maybe it's December, people are busy pre-holiday stuff and they'll turn out in the spring, but just seemed like there was a lot of red last week and then a lot of baby blue, sky blue, whatever that color is today. Like it was
a bad shade of blue.
Yes, it was not quite as friendly of an atmosphere. I'd say definitely today. I mean, with finals starting, I don't blame people for needing to study at 3 p.m. on a Sunday. And you can't put 2,000 students in a 900 student usual allocation every game. Like that's not sustainable or not going to happen every day. But we can talk about the Thriller Dome being electric on Wednesday because it was a lot of fun to be at that game. The crowd was into it. The fans were into it. But, I don't know. Is it people? This is me conjecturing a little bit here. Is it people going, hey, like, I'm just not enthused right now? Because there's plenty to be enthused about. And even with this team being 5-3, probably could be obviously be a little bit better. But there's a lot to like about what's going on the flats. And if there's a general self-selection out of that interest or out of that pool because of certain other sports and expectations there, then I think that's a big travesty because you missed out on women's basketball having a great opportunity with UConn. You miss out on supporting volleyball or seeing a good game like we saw this week twice. So
you're really using that self-select phrasing a lot today. I'm just going to point that out. I think you're on to something potentially about other sports affecting it, and we're going to get into the other sport in a bit. But I think you also have to consider the pandemic isn't necessarily over, right? So that is driving some attendance decline. Attendance for sports in general has been in decline the last couple of years. I'm not saying that this specifically is an instance of that, but that's also something that's driving some of the empty seats, or even seats that are going to other fans. And then at the same time, you have the age-old problem of Atlanta being a city of transplants, right? So you have, and I think that part, and then also the COVID part, I think are really driving some of those attendance quirks, at least for the non-student attendance. For the student attendance looked fine today. I was really
students filled up like the 900 seat allotment. It looked like it, probably a little bit,
absolutely.
But I don't think you can pin Atlanta as a city of transplants on the changes of the Georgia Tech attendance in basketball from 2019 to 2021. I'm sorry, we're coming off an ACC championship. This team is compelling.
So fine. That's why I listed it last.
Ban weeds. I'm hopeful that as ACC play starts, that we'll see a little bit more there.
I listed it last for a reason. It's definitely COVID. It's more COVID than other team related stuff, and I can empathize with that at least. Is that fair? It
just has felt like a lot of away fans in our building, and even with like Belmont and stuff like that for the women's game. I don't know. Maybe it's me writing too much into some of this stuff.
We'll see.
I think I'm still scarred from football the week before last.
Probably.
And that's, that's life there. But
yeah. Quick note. Men's basketball back in action on the 11th. I think that is Saturday. Yes, it is next Saturday versus LSU. That's a 6 p.m. tip on ESPN2. That is not at McCamish, but that McCamish Arena, McCamish Pavilion. That is at State Farm Arena for Holiday Hoops Giving. That event. I don't know if that's a tournament or just like a marathon kind of deal.
Just a showcase.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to note, LSU's undefeated. That's kind of scary.
Remember when LSU had Ben Simmons and was still mediocre?
Nah, I don't follow SEC basketball. Not worth my time.
It's not elite basketball.
Nah, that's the truth right there. But no, they are undefeated. Definitely a team to watch out for. Hopefully we come back and play a good game. I think Holiday Hoops Giving, an empty one, was when we played Kentucky last year. So hoping for a repeat of that, because that
do season ticket holders get tickets to that, or?
That's a great question, because if not, I need to go buy some of those. But
we'll figure that out offline. State Farm Arena is a nice venue.
I haven't been there since the renovation, so
yeah, we neither have I. Let's move on to the team that we were alluding to negatively in the last segment. The football team is back in the news. They have hired Chip Long, formerly of Tulane, as their offensive coordinator. I don't really have a lot of notes on this at the time right now. I think the news went official a couple of hours ago, and I wanted to do some more numbers and advanced stats analysis before making like a firm yes, no, good, bad. I know Robert, who was our other advanced stats expert, is also doing some analysis, and I think he'll have something out later this week. What is your instant reaction?
Hey, I get it. I see the numbers that this site does when there are coordinator questions. I see the traffic that happens on recruit announcements and stuff like that. I get it. It is some people's cup of tea. Going to be completely honest, it's not mine. And granted, I do have more interest in some of the coaching stuff, but I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on it because I don't really have a lot of say in who gets hired. And I was busy thinking about women's basketball men's basketball and volleyball this week. And
you might be the only or one of very few people in the Georgia Tech sports universe that can say that with a straight face.
Yeah, no, not that I don't care, because that's the wrong way to put it, but I just can't affect it. I don't want to worry about it. And, I had to preview volleyball 2 times this week, and we'll talk about them last to cap off the show. So stick around for that. But in terms of general thoughts, now that it's been announced, I think it's worthwhile that we're going to have to take some time to dig into some of the advanced stats and things like that. But, there were names that I had heard tossed around, and familiar names, unfamiliar names. I do know a thing or two about Tulane this year and other offenses in the past that Chip Long has run. And I don't know. I'm not going to use the phrase shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, because fun fact, the deck chairs on the Titanic actually had dedicated spots that they needed to be in. I
hate that you know that.
I listened to a 5.5-hour podcast on the sinking of the Titanic like 2 weeks ago. It was ridiculous. But
please finish your thought before.
My thought being, like, I don't not like it. I kind of like it. I got a soft spot for Tulane, even though they could have been better this year. I think him with more Chip Long with more talent could do good things, but it's going to require scheming to the personnel. I think in ways that maybe we haven't seen in the past. And I don't know. I'm eager to hear what he says, in particular in media availability and things like that. That would maybe give me more of a sense of his philosophy and how he plans to approach the Georgia Tech situation, rather than just a general conjecturing onto this man. Because at the end of the day, I do like hearing from whether it's Jeff Collins or Coach Collier in volleyball or whatever that is. I don't know. I do like hearing from the source about philosophy and stuff like that.
So here's my thesis, and I'm going to try to put this in, at least the initial thesis. I'm going to try to put this as concisely and as simply as I can. I think there were other candidates on the board that I would have preferred. Turn if Georgia Tech athletics thinks that this is the person to turn what has been a kind of scuffling offense around, and what looks to be a very important year in 2022, let's give it a spin and see what happens. That's all I got. I think I really want to look at some of the numbers. I want to do some comparative analysis on what the offense looked like under Dave Patnode and where Chip Long has been. So that'll include Notre Dame. He was there. He was a Broyles Award finalist at Notre Dame in 2018, and then he was at Tulane last year, or I guess this year. So I want to do some analysis on what his offenses have looked like. And also, be at least better informed and better prepared to discuss something like that before I give like an overarching take.
Yeah. I do have one question that I just thought of while I was sitting here. In your opinion, or your thoughts, your gut reaction, is this a Nate Woody situation?
I'm going to need you to explain the definition of that.
Granted, at the time, there wasn't necessarily a sense of like Paul Johnson needs to nail this hire and like this is the sinking ship type thing that I've heard tossed around a lot, which, gosh, the more that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is why I have an issue with terms like that. But
deck chairs on the Titanic, et cetera, et cetera.
Blah, blah, blah.
Okay. Look, you can go back to the 5-hour podcast later.
If there is a window here, like how do we see? I guess it's not really a one-to-one comparison based on the program state and just what he's inheriting and things like that. But I don't know. Like, is there a place where we can say, yes, this unit sees meaningful improvement? Because I feel like that's pretty true of Roof to Woody. I thought Nate Woody did a fine job, not like world beater, but a fine job. Respectable job. I would have liked to see him around for another year if the the system hadn't changed all around him. But do we live in a world where Chip Long can do a fine job and like that is okay? Like that's kind of a lame question, but
so
I don't know.
And this is why I wanted to get into the stats, because I think some comparative analysis between his before and after, or looking at his before and afters at Tulane and looking at his before and afters at Notre Dame will provide some insight into that. My thing with this though is a good job. How do you evaluate the success of an offensive coordinator? You evaluate them based on the efficiency and effectiveness of their offense, right? Georgia Tech in year 4 of Jeff Collins needs to show significant progress, not just proof of concept, but progress. It needs to show, and because it did not necessarily show proof of concept in year 3, it needs to also show proof of concept in 4, and then also show progress, right?
Yep.
How do you define those two terms? The way that I look at it, at least from my very high level in a general sense, is significant increases in SP plus ratings in those rankings, and then significant increases or decreases depending on the side of the ball in EPA per play, adjusted or unadjusted. I think looking at offensive S&P and looking at EPA per play for an offensive coordinator and how those two things have changed before and after his tenure, and even if you want to take a longer time scale, before and after his recruiting effect, I think those are the two things to look at. However, I'm shooting from the hip here. It's not analysis that I've done. It's not really a situation that either of us have experienced, right? Because Paul Johnson was the offensive coordinator for so long. He didn't hire a separate guy. And then Jeff Collins had Dave Patno for the last 3 years. So this is sort of a transition moment that neither of us have really experienced. We don't really have a lot of existing contextual data to go off of. So it's kind of a wait and see and do some basic data analysis. But as with all coaching hires, it's kind of a coin flip, whether it's going to be successful or not.
Yeah, I think that's a fair place to leave it at.
Okay. I think we should move on. We have the most important topic to talk about of this week, the women's volleyball team. We are already at 1 hour, at least on my recording timer. But this team has, I don't think I have the words to describe how fun they have been this season. And I want to give them as much time as they are due to talk about their weekend. So let's start with what happened at O'Keefe this past weekend in the Atlanta Regional. Is it a regional or is it a host site? I've never actually nailed down these names.
It's a host site. The regional is the Louisville regional that we're currently playing in, and we can get to them in a little bit because
we'll get there.
A surprise and delight.
Surprise and delight. So the two games, Tech started off its NCAA tournament journey versus the Citadel. They swept the Citadel in 3 sets, and then they advanced to round 2, the round of 32 versus Western Kentucky. They also swept Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky had beaten South Carolina, who, from anecdotal reports from some other people that had attended that game, South Carolina fans were just happy to be here. So,
yep. Interesting
note. So where do you want to start talking about these two games? They're sweeps, right? I can read out the line scores. I probably have to pull them up, but both of them were sweeps. But I think we both had some thoughts on how those sweeps got there.
Yeah. I think it's definitely kind of deceiving to look at them and be like, oh, sweeps. Oh, non-major.
They were not dominating performances. Like we've seen, like Tech ended the season with 2 dominating performances. They dumpstered Clemson and Florida State.
And Florida State's a good team.
Florida State is a tournament team. They got dumpstered by Nebraska, but in the second round. But point being, it's not like these performances were not like those.
They made it to the tournament and won a game. Point. And that's the thing too, is at that point, at the end of the year, Clemson's playing out the schedule. Florida State knows they're in. They're a top 15 RPI team. It's Thanksgiving weekend. You're just trying not to get injured at that point. And I think it's worth noting that Georgia Tech did get the job done. They did not drop a set in either games. And they were effective. That being said, the Citadel is inarguably the worst team Georgia Tech played all year, and a sweep
by far.
Yes,
by a good margin, because you said they were like 240th something in RPI.
UVA was the second lowest at 196.
Yeah, but this all comes with the inevitable but here.
Georgia Tech dominated Virginia when we played them in their building. The Citadel, obviously, there are no easy outs in the NCAA tournament. The Citadel was playing their best volleyball all year, had won many in a row, including sweeping through the SoCon tournament as the 7 seed to even qualify for the tournament. So they are playing quite literally their Super Bowl. Georgia Tech was the best team by far that they had played. I believe the only team above 100 in the RPI that the Citadel had played all year, if I remember my own recap right. But and then they came out playing like they wanted to win. Their attack percentage in the first set was 314. That means they're coming out. They're not making a lot of errors. If you look at those in total, they only had 3 in the first set, and it was close. Georgia Tech needed every point they got, right? They did wind up winning 25-21 in the first set, but Citadel came out hard, came out strong. Georgia Tech was able to pull away, but it never really got all that far apart. And I think even looking at the second set, which was a lot more, it was 25-15. I guess yes, Tech did pull away from about a 15-12 margin, 14-12 margin to really hammer home down the stretch. But the Citadel did not go quietly in this match, I think is the overwhelming thing there. It's worth noting that they brought 100 cadets who were loud and into the game. That has to help. They put on a spelling bee. I really know how to spell the Citadel well now. So thank you. I appreciate that. And then in the third, the Citadel was leading the majority of the set, I think until 1919.
Oh God, I have to pull up the race plot now. Hold on. You keep talking.
Yeah. Oh, also plugging Akshay on that. He and some colleagues who do some work with R and advanced stats have been able to scrape box scores. So now we have some advanced stats in the works. So that's fun. But no, Georgia Tech earned that win against the Citadel. And I mean, not that anyone was surprised, because Georgia Tech's a great team, but there are no easy outs in the NCAA tournament. The Citadel was playing like they wanted it, and they very nearly took the third set, which was decided by a score of 28-26. They did force a set point at 26-25 before Tech rattled off 3 straight points to win it and end it.
Yeah. So just to review the race plot here. So the first set was very close. It took Tech until I think about 5 points in to really break it open and create some breathing room. Second set was not close. I think Tech basically laid the gas on here. And then the third set was basically Citadel was ahead for a good chunk of this. The Tech didn't edge forward until, you're right about 1919. And then they got to 21st, looks like. And then they could not finish the drill at 24, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Right.
There's 4 straight match points or something like that.
Like multiple straight match points that Tech could not finish. They kept getting block errored or attack errored on. And then Citadel brought it back to 24-24. And then they were locked. You talked about 26-25 set point for the Citadel, which Tech then cashed in by turning in 2 points, 2 or 3 points of their own to finally take the match. But for a while there, that late part of that set, that late part of that third set, it got a little Atlanta sportsy. I got the vapors. there.
You're still up 2-0 there. And one thing I do want to point out in terms of just looking at the race plots versus kind of the Jake words definition, it's a little bit deceiving sometimes to look at stuff in a purely incremental fashion, because you're right. The second set did feel more like a kind of, I guess it sounds arrogant to say what we expected, but what we expected. But the first set and the second set both went to the 15-point media break at 15-12 in favor of Tech. But it is very much true, I think, that it felt a lot closer in the first set than it did in the second. And obviously the results played out that way, but it just an interesting tidbit as well on that.
Yeah. See, again, the Science of Southland podcast is a marriage of college athletics, numbers, and words, as I've always said.
Yeah. My favorite podcast, that's a marriage of numbers and words. But no. I do miss PAPN, for the record, anyone out there who remembers. But go ahead, Akshay.
So let's shift gears to talking about the Western Kentucky game. And the point of emphasis that I want to start out with here is that both of these teams played the game more or less the same way. The game plan seemed really, really consistent from game to game. They both aimed to win on the blocks, which was an adjustment that we've been seeing teams make against Tech starting in that first ACC weekend versus Notre Dame. They attempted to hold serve, which sounds obvious from like a volleyball strategy standpoint, but Tech is really good at generating service points and getting in rhythm and making you and playing really fast and stretching you out vertically, especially with Brett Bia coming in and knocking the absolute crap out of balls and trying to nail girls on the other team in the face, which happened like twice in this weekend. And holding serve also gives you another advantage, which is you can target the exact same people in the on serves. And both Western Kentucky and the Citadel targeted Paola Pimentel, Julia Bergman, and Bianca Bertolino repeatedly in the corners when they were serving. And it's something that I continue to notice. Obviously, it's one thing where we talk about in soccer, the first time that you see something, it's a mistake. The first time you see a player do something weird, it's a mistake. But the second time you see them do something weird, it's a pattern. And the third time you see them do something weird, it's a tactic, right? That's what it felt like to me, that this was a specific game plan that both teams had put together. They had watched the tape on this team and said, here are the places that we need to do well. Here are the players that we need to target on serves. We know that they are not as good at receiving the ball as their other teammates are. Make them receive the ball and then act and try to make Georgia Tech build rallies off of that.
I don't think it's a coincidence either that there were several times in the first match that Bergman would really stick out her neck to go grab a ball on a serve or a hit that maybe in another game she just kind of lets lie or lets teammates take care of it. So not trying to say anything about that, but it was they're aware. They were aware. I think it's pretty clear there. So
there were definitely, and I think we noted this while we were watching the game too. There were a couple communication issues. That Julia Bergman thing was very aware. I don't know if it was a communication issue or if it was a consistent positioning issue, maybe something tactically that Tech was trying to do to maybe break their opponents out of their rhythm at targeting specific players on serves. But that's something that you saw repeatedly where there are players that were sort of hero balling their way to serve receptions. And it was strange for a team that is pretty clean when it comes to that sort of stuff. It was strange to see.
Yeah. Speaking of other things that we can talk about in terms of opponent game plan, it is worth noting that for Western Kentucky, it worked out of the gate.
Yes. They racked up
5-1 hole, 6-2 hole real fast out of the gate in that set. And it was particularly close the rest of the way. But Western Kentucky came out with a plan, and it really took I pulled up the race plot on my end now. you'll notice at 10-8, I think in about maybe 10 match actions, right? So that is a collection of
It's rallies, like digs and
Yeah.
kills and
Yeah.
and sets and all that fun stuff.
Yes. Tech nails 4 straight points and they don't look back after that. But that is hey, like we need to do something, and it's them capitalizing on holding service and there's obviously there's rallies and game flow that come with that. But I don't think you can deny that once this team catches fire, I think we've seen throughout the year that they do a good job of, capitalizing on making those adjustments. And I mean, if any staff has proven to us over the years that they are more than capable of that, it's this one. But going on a nice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-point run, that puts you right back in the game. And I think that was emblematic kind of what Tech was trying to do. Taking advantage of a top 20 team. Because let's be real, coming into this match, Western Kentucky, top 20 RPI, have won almost 50 conference games in a row, have won 21 straight this year. This was not a bad opponent. This was not at all a unworthy to be here opponent. This is a great team that they played, and they played well.
Yeah, and this is something that you mentioned when we saw the draw. I think when we first looked at the draw, and then something you mentioned over the course of the week, Western Kentucky had a lot of Loyola Marymount vibes from when
Loyola Chicago vibes.
Loyola Chicago. They both have Loyola in the name. They're basically the same thing. Loyola Chicago vibes from the men's basketball's one game in last year's NCAA basketball tournament, where they were criminally underseeded and got slated into a matchup versus an ACC opponent. This seems like a similar situation. Obviously, you're talking about the CUSA and the strength of schedule there. And I mean, Western Kentucky going undefeated for 4 or 5 years in that conference. It's kind of ridiculous how dominant their stretch has been. And they came to play, right? You talked about them coming out hot, and if they had kept up that game plan and Tech had not adjusted, I think during that first set break, after that first set, I think this would have been a much more competitive later stages of the match as time wore on. But it was hot. It was humid. The crowd was in a frenzy for most of the night. And it was a much less half and half crowd. It was a much less divided crowd than it was versus the Citadel, which I think also helped, because you have 100-something cadets from the Citadel who were, I don't know if they were required to be there, but there are 100 cadets who have been partaking in the specific concessions offerings that O'Keefe has available for purchase. And also they were riding a hot streak, right? They were riding a hot streak from of a really competitive volleyball team that had basically burned their way all the way through the Big South tournament to an auto bid and right into the tournament, right into the full tournament. And Western Kentucky just did not have that same amount of crowd support and was not able to play off of that in an already hostile environment. And I think between the humidity, which I honestly do think was a factor, because that place was hot. It was steamy in O'Keefe, that the ACs were not on. I don't know if that's by design or if that's just what happened. Between the humidity and between Tech making adjustments, Western Kentucky just kind of faded down the stretch. Like set two after it went to like 6-6 was not close. And set 3 was not close until the very end when things got a little squirrely late and came within a couple points. But
again, I disagree with the characterization of set 3. That was less of it wasn't close. It was more of Western Kentucky is a good team that wanted to win. Never count out a team that believes in themselves, a talented team. And the fact that it was within 2 at 25-23, I believe was the final, but don't quote me on that.
It was
around.
I'm pretty sure it was. That's what I have in front of me, at least.
Yeah. Tech's lead was like 6 or 7 in the middle of the match, but by the by the closing stages, it was down to 2 or 3. And that when you're that close in volleyball, it's not a coin flip, but all you need is a little bit of a streak. And they were able to do that. They came very close to forcing extra points and maybe another set. But Georgia Tech was able to take advantage of it. And that's the significant takeaway.
And one of the things I really recognize watching this game in person for one of the first times this year is that Tech loves to play fast. And I think that it goes back to something you were talking about in that first set versus Western Kentucky, where they rattled off those points after being like 4 or 5 or 6 points after being down for most of the set already. All those were off either aces or very quick rallies where they just did not let Western Kentucky get set. And, as the rally develops, Western Kentucky has a chance to take a little bit of control, assert their spacing and make Tech move around as much during the rally and during play. Tech played fast. They played very aggressive. And it worked out, especially like we're saying in that first set where they had to come back and assert control.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to note there, we noted it last week, I believe, talking about some of the changes we saw in the offense for Clemson and Florida State to account for things that Louisville and Pitt were able to take advantage of. But we saw, particularly as the sets got later in the Western Kentucky game, of Tech taking advantage of the middles. Moss and Morissette, even if it doesn't show up on the score sheet nearly quite in the same way as the Bertolino and Bergman and Brambilla attack. I would definitely say the middle is coming into form. And again, you got to think this is for a lot of teams a really big deal, and it can be a nerve-wracking experience too, especially hosting the postseason. So hopefully it's now we're playing with house money. They're a team that has lived up to their own expectations, and I think they could pursue accordingly from here.
Absolutely. So let's set the table for this weekend. This coming weekend. The last note that I have on this weekend is that for the first time ever, I think in both of our Tech event going careers, the team, the coaches, and then the administrators that were in attendance at O'Keefe on Saturday night did the horse after the game. I've never seen that. I've never, ever seen that. And it was just a very cool moment. And it's one that I think that'll become one of the most iconic things that we think about when it comes to this tournament run, is that the team, the coaches, the administrators all realize that how important the bandbox, the literal band, and then the bandbox metaphor of O'Keefe Gym was important to their success this season. And, you get that just amazing moment, a really cool moment on the court, their last game there this season.
I've got a question for you.
Oh, God.
And we're going to plan the podcast out loud right here, right now. Do we save the discussion for the NCAA neutral site rules for the off season, or can we unbox that right here, right now?
I believe you're referring to set the table. You're referring to the announcer not being able to say Point Tech,
the band not being able to play the fight song.
They played the fight song after
TV breaks. The last whistle. No, they only played it after the final whistle.
Okay.
They only played it twice in the entire weekend, and both was after the win and after the TV was done.
Okay. Apparently I don't keep band analytics, so that's something I'm going to have to add to my repertoire. Okay. So I don't think we need to have a referendum on them, but also just call them regionals. Don't call them host sites, call them regionals, and just let it be a home environment. I
would also note that the Citadel student allotment was the same size as the Tech one, and that's kind of a bit
much.
They had 100 cadets there and 100 tickets available on Friday night to Tech students. But I'm still scarred from 2019 Auburn baseball terribleness. If you are good enough that you have earned the right to have a home match, call it what it is. just let it be a home match. It's
So-
not like it's going to be that much friendlier to the away team.
So here's the weird part. And this segues into the point that I was about to tee up before I dived into this tangent. When Tech hosted a regional pot, whatever the heck they're calling this, where they were a host site for the first round in 2004, they were not the national seed in that pod. It was actually UC Santa Barbara. UC Santa Barbara was the number 13 national seed in that pod. So it's weird that, like, I think you apply for the pods ahead of time and then they're allocated. I don't know how it works. And I don't like that it comes down to this. I can see the cogs turning in your head and also your eyes preparing to roll right into the back of your skull.
I just think the thing that makes college sports special is all the stuff that comes with doing college sports. And we can talk about football playoff expansion too, about whether having all those games at neutral sites.
Not today. Not today.
I just think if it's going to be I would rather play Louisville in their home gym and feel like it's a thing. You know what I mean? That's a fun place to play. O'Keefe's a great place to play. And to everyone's credit, again, having those games here was something that is a pretty unique experience. And I think elevated the very unique events or, situation that is O'Keefe Gym. So great to see everyone put on a great show. And it was great to see Tech come out on top.
Okay. So now we get to do the set dressing for next weekend, which I think is more fun because, number one, this is Tech's first Sweet 16 berth in the NCAA tournament since that 2014 that we talked about, or I just talked about. To my knowledge, they have never advanced past this round.
Nope. Elite Eight, 2003.
They did advance in 2003?
Yes, to the Elite Eight.
Okay, so I should have let him write these notes then. They advanced to the Elite Eight in 2003. In 2004, they lost to eventual national runner-up Minnesota in 5 sets in the Minneapolis Regional. Their path in 2004, like I said, they were a host site despite not being the national seed at that host site. They swept Clean Old Fashioned Hate, a tournament brand of Clean Old Fashioned Hate. They swept the national seed number 13 UC Santa Barbara in the site final, and then the aforementioned loss to national number 4 Minnesota in 5 sets. So where, sir, does that leave us this week? You might ask. Georgia Tech will play number 9 national seed Ohio State in Louisville in the Sweet 16. That will be on Thursday, December 9th at 3 p.m. on ESPN Plus. The winner will play the winner of Florida and Louisville. The Florida-Louisville game is on Thursday as well, but that is the early game at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Set the table for me.
Honestly,
Louisville Regional.
Honestly, it's kind of a crying shame that the number 1 team in the country has to play a 1 p.m. game on a Thursday because their fans deserve to see some Sweet 16 action. So that's sad. But Florida Louisville, maybe that gives Florida an opening. I assume the place should be pretty full, but if you got a 9 to 5, a little bit tough to get to the game at 1, and who knows what it'll look like for Ohio State versus Tech at 3 p.m. It is worth noting that is on ESPN Plus, one of 2 games in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 rounds. Now that those have been announced, times and channels to not be on ESPNU, which is a little bit annoying. Should probably have those on the U or something along those lines. But Tech drawing the late game. You have that question in there. With Tech playing at 3 p.m., I don't think it's really that much of an advantage for Tech to be playing later. The one thing that it may give them is at least knowing who their opponent is going to be. But again, you got to get through Ohio State first. So Ohio State matches up pretty interestingly with Tech. We can kind of dive in on the specifics there, but Florida's not a bad team. They're the number 16 national seed. but maybe they have a little bit more of an opening because they're playing at 1 p.m. and maybe it's less raucous, but that's a tough draw for them. And Louisville's looked amazing all year. They're undefeated 28-0. So, or well, I guess 30-0 now, but it's not often you see a team get to 30 wins in this sport if you're not one of the best in the country. So
I'm still just dumbstruck by the scheduling here. So let's just here. So let me go through the schedule of games for Thursday. You start in Purdue, BYU at Purdue at 11 a.m. Eastern, which is rough. That's just rough. Let's see. So there's no other game at 11 a.m. Eastern. Then you go to Pittsburgh, Kansas, which is at 1. Louisville, Florida is at 1. I think that's it for 1 o'clock. Then Ohio State, Georgia Tech is at 3. I can do numbers with my hands. Baylor, Minnesota is at 3. UCLA, Wisconsin is at 5. Washington, Texas is at 7:30. And then Illinois, Nebraska, for some godforsaken reason, is at 9:30, which I guess is
8:30 Central.
8:30 Central. But also, like, why is Texas on at 6:30 Central?
I don't know.
Why?
Not a bad time.
Why is Wisconsin on at 4? Why is Wisconsin on at 4 Central? Why is Minnesota on at 2 Central?
I think for the sake of the sport, like especially because it's a random Thursday, it would be better. Maybe less games would be on TV to have them all stacked in prime time. Now that I think that out loud, but I don't know. It's just a weird schedule altogether.
It is a legitimate.
They're not all on TV. But
it's a legitimate crime against humanity that Purdue is playing a volleyball game at 10 a.m. local. Yeah. That is a crime against humanity. Not saying that BYU is going to get dumpstered or anything, but like playing a competitive volleyball game at 10 a.m. Like this is a body clock situation. We had this conversation about Stanford and Northwestern a couple years ago when they played in football in Chicago. This is dumb. I don't like this. This game, like this BYU Purdue game, should be like a 6:30 tip.
Yeah, I mean, I did see a suggestion floating around out there. Stagger 1, 3, 5, 7 on one channel, and then like 2, 5, 6, 8 on news or the U or whatever. So credit to the Twitter account that I saw that from. I think it was something random, but it's just weird. Like they go head to head. There's off hour starts. It's all over the place. Looking at Saturday, we do have the old 8 p.m., 10 p.m., 4 p.m., 6 p.m., 6 p.m. being Louisville should Tech advance past Ohio State. So at least it'll be, at the exact same time as the basketball game for people that want to watch both.
Oh God, I hate that ESPN has the rights to all of these tournaments because it just sucks. Like this scheduling just sucks so much.
And that's the thing too. Literally same time, 12-11 at 6 p.m. on 2 and the U should we win hopefully on Thursday. But I think that gets into what we started the day with, right? We talked about ESPN and the SEC God. And a Big Ten championship commentary. And you look at this and yes, having things in a predictable spot is arguably kind of good, but at the same time, the SEC network and the ACC network exist for reasons. So does the Big Ten network for ways to get these games on television and to in front of more eyes. And I think it just goes back in that commentary that we can have plenty of times. We've had it before where the fact that women's basketball, softball, volleyball, men's baseball, and then obviously the rest of the swimming, track, whatever, field hockey, all get lumped in. I think it does them a disservice for just kind of being parts to feed the content machine, for lack of a better term. And I think, just more access or even a better contract that would make them more money because they frankly are getting lowballed with the result that volleyball is getting for a sport that's really seeing a lot of growth. I think that's true of softball, of women's basketball, of women's volleyball, and other sports like men's and women's lacrosse. Even stuff like wrestling is at better TV ratings. Swimming, baseball, heck, a rising tide lifts all ships, and getting interest in these down the line sports. But I don't know. It's tough when you're asking your fans to, if you're a Louisville fan, to have to tune in at 1 p.m. on a Thursday when you're the number one team in the country in a thing that for a lot of fans they could easily access if it was off the afternoon slate. I don't know. I'm really far in the weeds on this. We gotta take a look.
Yeah, I hate to drop kick you off of your soliloquy pedestal, but we do have the actual game to preview as well. I spent a lot of time on these notes. Come on.
Hey, I tossed some stuff in there, and I think it's worth pointing out. Ohio State comes in with a pretty consistent, similar record to us. They're 25-5 overall. Number 9 in RPI. That's 2 spots lower than us. Number 9 in the coaches as well. That's 4 spots higher than us. They've won 9 of their last 10. But you got any comments on any of those rankings? Any of that overall stuff?
I don't really. I just, the coaches poll is just nonsense at this point. It's like, it's worse than the football coaches poll at just being consistent and smart. And I just, bad.
Yeah. I will say they agree on the top 4, but after that, it really does get squirrely. Purdue and Ohio State versus where a school like Tech fell is pretty interesting to see. But in terms of other notes that we have, we did say 9 of the last 10 before the tournament. It's an important clarification to also say that it's 9 of the last 12. That's because they lost the number 12 seed nationally, Minnesota, twice in span, number 4 seed Wisconsin. Their best win is against number 10 Purdue. They went 1-1 against the Boilermakers, won the home legs, lost the away in 5, so very tight match. And they're 3-4 against the top 25 RPI, while Tech is 6-4 and with a win over a top 3 Pittsburgh team. So should match up well, but you can't use pure RPI 9 versus 7 to judge just as much as you can say that they beat Purdue while we beat Pitt or something like that.
Did you say you can't just use just RPI to evaluate teams, sir?
Correct.
Do I have some other metrics for you? I did a little bit of digging this past couple of days on volleyball analytics, as I am wont to do on occasion. And I found a beautiful, website wasn't beautiful, but beautiful statistical analysis system called Viper, VIPR. Great name, by the way, from a person called Husker Geek. As we know, Nebraska, very good at volleyball, very crazy about volleyball in the middle of a flyover state. But man, this guy has all of his systems, all of his data pipelines set up, all based around point ratings, which he classifies as a calculation of each team's per set scoring efficiency. Each team's ability to score points and their corresponding propensity to give away points is iteratively compared against their opponents, and the team's rating is adjusted. So this is the website that I use for a lot of putting together some of these numbers that I have below. Let's talk about the matchup in just pure overall Viper rating. Ohio State is number 9. Tech is number 7. Interesting. Better than the coaches poll at evaluating teams, I might say. At least based on what we are able to see. Ohio State is number 6 in adjusted hit percentage allowed. So they're the number 6 overall defense in the nation. And then they are number 13 in adjusted hit percentage. So what they actually generate. If there is a weakness based on the numbers on this Ohio State team, and really they're pretty bulletproof from what I saw on the stat sheet, they are 44th in their adjusted block percent allowed. So that's where Tech can do some damage here, really emphasizing those blocks and really taking advantage of that. Some players to watch. Setter Mac Pedraza has accounted for 12 wins of value based on her setting ability alone. She's averaging about 0.21 win probability added per set played. And that pairs very nicely with her defensive specialist counterpart, Kylie Murr, who has 13 wins of value alone, just based on her defense, which is 0.14 per set played overall. Really, really good team. Really, really numbers-wise good team. Like I said, basically bulletproof other than on the blocks. It'll be a really, really tight matchup.
Yeah. I think the advanced stats indicate as much. And that
advanced stats, volleyball analytics, they're happening.
It does match the kind of, resume and strength of schedule type inclinations that you can have too. And I think that's the most powerful argument for the validity of advanced stats in general is when they match what you can see and think and observe from traditional metrics or from the eye test or from who you played, stuff like that. Ohio State's played them, like maybe they don't have the peak win that we do, but pretty close.
Unlike, the football team that inhabits Athens, Ohio State actually has played somebody.
That is fair. I don't know if I noted this. I did want to say one more time, Tech's been tested 6-4 against the top 25 in the RPI. Ohio State is 3-4 against that, but there's no slouching. It's going to be meat grinders from here the way on out. Florida winning versus Louisville does not
massive upset, by the way.
It would be massive upset.
Massive.
Does not necessarily mean that our path would suddenly come wide open, right? If we beat Ohio State, whatever we're seeing, whether it's same old from Louisville, who did sweep us twice this year, it is worth acknowledging, or be that from the other outcome of like Florida, like that. Whatever happens after Ohio State, it's one game at a time, and they're all going to be tough, no matter who it is.
But you got to beat Ohio State first.
Yes,
and like I said, it's going to be a tight one. I thought going into the Western Kentucky one, that one was going to be tight. It was a lot less stressful than it ended up when I thought it was going to be. It was still stressful. I'm not going to say that I overlooked it, but this one, 3 p.m. to like 5 p.m. on Thursday is just going to be a lot to handle.
Yep. And, I think the theme not the theme, but the vibe of this week we talked about with 2 volleyball games, 2 basketball games, 2 women's basketball games and 2 men's basketball games. Last week, it's going to track pretty well with the vibes of this week. So just prepare for another. And those are our 3 sports in action. So I think that we'll have a lot to talk about at least next week too.
I think we spent about, 45 minutes on volleyball alone. I think that is very on brand for us.
Remember when we used to try and hurry up through the non-rev sports in like 5 minutes?
We can have personal growth. We make changes, we grind the tape and, we adjust, we grow and we learn.
Hey, these folks are fun to cover. Volleyball's been fantastic this year. If you've not seen a game, tune in, pitch in the $7 for ESPN Plus.
Absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it for this game alone.
It will be, and already is, a top 3 season in Tech history for volleyball. It could very well be number 1 by the time we're done talking. So yeah, opportunities don't come around every year like this.
Yeah. And we'll be here next weekend, whatever the result, whatever happens, we'll talk about it. We'll dissect it.
It'll be fun and worthy and all those wonderful things.
They also still did the horse at the end of one of their games, which I will have infinite respect for, because doing the horse after some games that have sucked, like it really does suck, but it was sweet. It was really fun watching them do it with us. And I mean, even the athletic director did it. Todd was there. Todd didn't know what was going on. I don't think Todd has ever seen the horse done in person, but
I think that's a bit of an unfair speculation. I declined to comment, but it was good to see them all join in, and it's a fun team. Like I said,
fun team.
That's the thing you have to take away about a lot of these non-rev sports, or maybe you're not super into men's basketball or baseball or whatever. Like there's a lot of heart in a lot of places, and I don't know. Hopefully you at least find some value in baseball come spring, or basketball as we get towards ACC play.
Cool. Anything else to discuss before we hit the 2-hour mark?
No, I got to go flip my laundry again, so should probably do that before it gets too late.
All right, plug your stuff or our stuff, or do the thing.
Comments, observations to from the rumble seat at gmail.com. You can catch us at fromtherumbleseat.com for the written word, FTRS blog on Twitter. We're super close to 4,000 followers. That's a mark that's meant a lot to me and Akshay and all the rest of their team. And it really is a team in terms of people that put in coverage there, just like it is on the site. I don't know if you have feedback or comments on whether it's analytics or content here or content on the site, just let us know. Mailbag does come out on Wednesdays. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them there as well. I am at Jake Grant 98 on Twitter. You can follow me there. Akshay is findable, but doesn't publicly advertise. So I respect that decision. And in the meantime, follow along on all of our outlets for Purdue's on football, as it is coach search season winding down and analytics season winding up at the same time as we have basketball kind of coming into its own here, as well as our content on other sports. So see you around.